Today's episode is a rerun of a rerun presented by Andrea, one of the producers of our other podcast, 3clipspodcast.com. She's presenting the episode while Jay, the main host of the show, is out on parental leave. It's a fantastic episode. It's one that I think all of you in the audience podcast can learn something from. Okay, I'm going to kick it off to Andrea. Enjoy today's episode.
Hey, it's Andrea, one of the producers of 3 Clips. Jay's on parental leave, so this week's show is a rerun, but it's a fun one. The guest in this episode is an author, a TED Talker, and an in-demand public speaker, and he was pretty successful with 5 books on the New York Times bestseller list before he launched his podcast. Now, if you have achieved success in another field and you want to launch a podcast, the temptation is to start an interview show talking to other successful, influential people, important, well-known, inspiring, smart expert folks. We see this all the time with actors, TV personalities, and aging politicians, but with plenty of non-famous hosts too. If you're a regular listener, you may have heard Jay make the joke that most interview shows could be renamed with the same title, Talking Topics with Experts. It's like we get stuck on that one concept. Whenever we think about doing something more, our brains start pushing back. We think, oh, well, I don't have the budget or the staff to do a big NPR-style, highly produced narrative show. Or maybe we think we just don't want to do something kitsch or gimmicky to make it more entertaining. Or, hey, I'm not running the show full-time at my business. I only have so much time. So we have to do interviews. Let's put aside for a moment the fact that doing interviews isn't a shortcut and still requires lots of work to do well. You can still have a great show concept and a great episode format while doing an interview show. You don't need more budget or time to do lots and lots of rigorous editing. When your show has a great concept, that affects what you'll ask your guests. You want to extract certain types of moments or certain content because you have an angle or a conceit about what you explore. And if the show concept informs what you ask, the episode format informs when you ask it. In other words, when you have a format in mind, it affects your flow, your conversation, the order in which things appear. The show we profile in this episode is a perfect example of what could have been yet another interview pod with yet another parade of the same guests you've heard before. So how do we differentiate? Jay and his guests talk about building rapport, especially when your interviewee seems to be a bigger name than you are and maybe you're nervous. They discuss the subtle art of interrupting, and at one point our guest actually goes into his inbox and pulls out the cold outreach email that he used to book Judy frickin' Bloom. This is 3 Clips.
I want to know how to do the things you do. A thing or 2 or 3 that only comes from you. This is 3 Clips.
Welcome to 3 Clips, a Castos original podcast. I'm Andrea Maraskin, filling in for Jay Acunzo. To be clear, I'm just filling in for the intro and credits. Last week, I promised you Jay's dulcet tones, and I'm a woman of my word. Today we're talking to Neil Pasricha, host of 3 Books, a show that, by the way, helped inspire Jay to launch this show. 3 Books is a simple but brilliant twist on the average interview show with an influential person. Every guest talks about the 3 most transformative books in their life. Neil is really on a quest to find the 1,000 most transformative books in the world. And as you'll hear, he's kind of a character. So let's get into it. Here's best-selling author Neil Pasricha with Jay Acunzo.
No one knows how to pick a book. Like it's the hardest thing to do in the world. There's 200 million books on Amazon. A new million books comes out every year. And so everyone just picks what's in a pile at the airport, you know? And so I'm on a quest to uncover and discuss the 1,000 most formative books in the world 3 books at a time. To do that, I'm flying around the world, literally, to sit down with 333 of the world's most inspiring people and ask each of them which 3 books most shaped their lives.
I think it's easy to describe what your show is, but what I'm curious about is before your show exists in the classic show running style, you used to have to pitch it to a Hollywood executive, and many people still do to Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. So the show is called 3 Books. Pitch it to me Hollywood style. It's that classic, like, it's like X meets Y, or it's like show 1 meets show 2 meets show 3. Like, if you had to pitch it that way, how would you actually pitch it? And what would those, why those things too?
The show has the vulnerability of a Howard Stern interview combined with the nugget-like insights and tools of a Tim Ferriss show podcast, sprinkled with, some nerd sprinkles on top, where people who organize their books in the Dewey Decimal System or can geek out about a book no one else has ever heard of, get their jollies out kind of through that conversation.
I love that. That was so great. And I do remember listening to your show. Every time I hear it, I always smile, even though I don't quite understand it. You tell people after you describe their first book, for example, of the 3, you're like, all right, here's the book. Here's what it's about. File this away under this in the Dewey Decimal System. And I always smile to that.
Well, the Dewey Decimal System is like the most underappreciated thing in like the book. Because, Jay, you walk into a library and the whole library is organized for you under this the guidance of this guy who died a long time ago named Melvin Dewey. He was like Mendeleev for the periodic table. He was like, this is where everything's going to go. We're going to have 300s are going to be about psychology, 400s are going to include sports, 500s are going to include, and it was every single book just goes into smaller and smaller and smaller files. So I've organized my own personal home bookshelf that way, and I like to give the Dewey Decimal aficionados out there a little shout out on where the books should be filed. By the way, that also serves the librarian listening population well.
Right. And you do mention that it's for, in part, librarians and other book lovers and creators, writers, sellers. I love the way you understand who the audience is and what the show is for. The other thing I love that you do is you're really good at packaging it as, yes, it's now a serialized thing, right? So obviously there's a series to it, but there's now this number over the top, which is you're on the hunt for the 1,000 most formative books in the world. It's okay if you can't share this yet because you have something planned. I'm not great at math. I was an English major. But if you count out the number of guests you plan on having, and then you multiply those guests by 3, you actually fall 1 book shy of the 1,000. So are we getting some kind of special final book, or what? How are you going to get 1,000?
Well, this is so fun that you asked this question because, first of all, I want to just point out to all your listeners, we are alive for 1,000 months. People don't realize that. The average person is literally alive for 1,000 months. That's the average lifespan. And if you want to talk about how that number can kind of feel important on a daily basis, the average person is also awake for 1,000 minutes. That's how much you're awake every day. So I think this number 1,000 has a lot of frequency through our lives that we don't really see. My first blog was called 1000awesomethings.com. Partly why I organized this podcast as 1,000 is because I love the idea that it's finite. I don't like podcasts or blogs or newspapers, magazines. Everything is infinite. Nothing has an end date or an end point. No TV shows just go till they're canceled generally, So I think by keeping something finite, you force yourself to be more quality conscious and quality oriented because you're always like, I have less and less space to put this in. And as for the number 1 that sticks out, I am actually gestating on a couple of different ways to make that pop, that final book. But one of them, I'll just share one idea. I don't know if I'm going to do this.
Sure.
Is, okay, so we'll have 999 books, right? And this, by the way, the show doesn't end until September 1st, 5:52 a.m., 2031. Right, so it's going to take a long time to get there, but by the end, we will have so many books will have been repeated because I already have. I don't let people repeat books, but if they choose, I want the Fountainhead, literally, Chip Wilson's I want the Fountainhead. Founder of Lululemon. I was like, sorry, Chip. Tim Urban of waitbutwhy.com picked the Fountainhead. He's like, oh darn. But then I thought I was done with it. Then Mark Manson's like, how about the Fountainhead? I'm like, well, I just gave that to Tim Urban. And then Adam Grant, no joke, was like, how about the Fountainhead? Like literally everyone, I'm like, what is up with all these like white dudes picking the Fountainhead? So now it wasn't to say that they are all like hardcore, objectivists, they just the book was formative to them at one point. But anyway, I was thinking about by the end, maybe I have everyone who's listening to the show at the time vote or somehow input onto the single most formative book in the world, whether that is done through some sort of crowdsource, some algorithm, some new like chip we'll have in our necks by the year 2031. I don't know.
Oh God.
But like there's some sort of some amazing contest or way to sort of ultimately declare a book to be the ultimate most formative book of all time. And I thought that could also serve as an incredible media hook to get attention and PR on the concept that we just tape. By the way, guys, like we spent 13 years counting these down till right now. Right.
So you and I talked excitedly like we are right now. Before you launched the show, you called me up. We talked about podcasting because I've just been immersed in it. And, I so appreciated you coming on my show early before I had much proof. And we talked about, I don't know if you remember, but we talked about this concept of an open loop, which is basically, you start a story. A very crude open loop is a clickbait headline. That's an abuse of an open loop. But an open loop is just a tease. It's something that raises your anticipation to finish what was going on, to get the answer to a question or whatever. And it's left open-ended until a later point. And so, a good example is how a lot of dramatic TV shows open with cold opens. Breaking Bad did this probably better than any show ever. They would show like a charred stuffed animal smoking and floating in a pool with sirens blaring and smoke in the air. And then they would show you the opening credits. That's an open loop. And you're having this march towards 1,000 creates mini open loops because you want to know what the next 3 will be and the next 3. And it has this one massive open loop, which is if you figure it out as a listener, wait a sec, this isn't going to add up to 1,000. What are we going to do for 1,000? So I love that because it's very, whether intentionally or not, it created this irresistible open loop.
Well, you are being humble because not only did I remember you told me that, I try to do that. And like literally chapter 37 of 3 books with Malcolm Gladwell, I say at the beginning of the intro, and maybe this is an abuse of the open loop, I don't know, I say, I was super anxious and nervous when I interviewed him, which is true. But as soon as I pushed stop on the recorder, he said 3 simple words that calmed me down. At the end of the show, I'll tell you what those 3 words are. Like I do that kind of stuff because I just want people to listen to the end. And then I tell them at the end, he said, and I'll tell you, he said, that was fun. Like that was literally what he said. Like as soon as I turned off the recorder, I was nervous the whole thing. Then I was like, why didn't you tell me that at the beginning? I would have chilled out. But I was so stressed. As soon as I turned it off, he was like, well, that was fun. I was like, oh, he smiled. At the beginning, he like wouldn't crack a face at all. Like, I was
wow.
Like, this guy's it's not going anywhere. Yeah.
I think it's only an abuse if the payoff isn't there. Like if you truly won't believe what number 7 in the list is, you won't believe, right? If it'll blow you, if it actually blows your mind, you're fine with it. But usually what happens is people are great at the opening of the loop and not great at the closing of it. But you're very audience conscious and earnest in your attempt to make something great here, that I have no doubt that when you use an open loop, I'm sure it comes off great. And while we're on the subject of open loops, I do want to create one right now for listeners, because this is a show about shows, so we'll get meta. I'll admit that I'm doing it. What we're going to do when we play your 3 clips is we are going to talk about one theme that I see coming through not only in your life, Neil, but now in your show, is your ability to build rapport and ensure that it's a free-flowing, like you said, that kind of Howard Stern-ish effect where people kind of forget a mic is there and they just talk. And so many interviews end up like an interview, like a job interview. It's almost like the subject is interviewing for the role of smart person or charming person for the listener. Like, hire me into your lives for the next 45 minutes because every answer, look how smart I am. And that's not what I get from your show at all. I get this very organic conversation. So we're going to talk in this episode about how that happens. There's an open loop for you. What do you think?
I love it. I'm curious to find out.
Okay. We're going to play some clips, by the way, not just from people that I know prior to interviewing them. So I did find some clips where I think you were nervous heading in, like we mentioned that Malcolm Gladwell, and you had to build rapport meeting them for the first time under the auspices of we're interviewing you, which I think is more difficult sometimes than a friend. You and I have rapport already, so I find this rather easy. So anyways, there's an open loop for you. It's audio, but you and or the guest often describe where you're sitting, and it really provides a nice sense of place, and in a medium that is visual, because you have to plant an image in someone's mind to understand what's happening. And you do such a nice job of that, Neil, of like describing, we're sitting here, to my left is this. I traveled down here from my home in Toronto. We're in Key West, Florida.
You know why I do that, Jay?
Yeah.
Because in the first few episodes of the Tim Ferriss show, which I loved, you'd hear like a siren going by or like a dog barking. And Tim would almost say apologetically, like, oh, sorry, I'm at a park in San Francisco. And then I think he started using a real studio, and love him, love the show. But I was like, I missed it. I was like, damn, that was better when you could kind of picture the guy sitting in a park in San Francisco. So I've chosen to try to not just retain, but create unique oral experiences as best as possible through visualization. So when I met Tim Urban down in New York City, it was a bizarre, tightly cramped coffee shop with people talking beside us and techno music playing. I said, we're at a bizarre, cramped coffee shop with people beside us with techno music, just so you could picture that too. And maybe it comes out in the voice, and maybe it comes out in what we're saying a little bit.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Tim Urban and interviewing him in a New York coffee shop, because that's the first clip I have for us. So let's get into the clips. And first, before we do, I have I always play a transition sound to let people know we're going into and out of a clip compared to our voices. So I picked a strategic sound. I think I want to change it at all times, and maybe I'll fit the theme of the guest. But here's the sound I picked for you.
Flipping paper in a book.
Yep. How about that? A little customized clip for you.
I love it.
So clip number 1 comes from your episode with Tim Urban. Tim is the creator of the unbelievable blog. I'm such a fan of it. I read it all the time. Wait, but why? And it takes these deep, fundamental, philosophical looks at really big and complex topics. And he does it, best of all, in a really delicious way. It's very entertaining. He uses metaphors and stick figures, brilliant deconstructions, and he really helps anybody feel like they can understand these complex topics about human nature and science and society. And he has millions of subscribers and readers. He's got this TED Talk about procrastination, which is both hysterical and widely viewed. It's something like 30 million at the time that you spoke to him, Neil. And the guy is just one of the most creative and philosophical minds out there. And in fact, that's how you introduced him as a sort of modern philosopher at the top of your episode. And so just for people listening, in this clip, you're talking about this childlike curiosity that gets trained out of us as we get older. And we're going to cut right into you speaking, partway into you saying to Tim, well, Tim, you've retained that curiosity. So let me play that clip for you, and then we'll chat after.
You've retained that in a sense that your work is full of curiosity. You've called yourself many times a very curious person, and it's clear in your writing that you are very curious. What do we do? I have little kids. How do I keep them curious? Was anything done to you as you grew up that kept you curious that way? Or do you see other people doing that well as parents?
I think the parents were very hands-off, and I was also an only child till I was 5. So I think that gives you a lot of time to just kind of,
I like that phrase, only child till I was 5. I'm going to start using that. I was an only child till I was 2.
My fiance is an actual only child, and she says it's like cultural appropriation to pretend to be an only child. She gets very mad at me, and she says it's not all fair that I get to call myself that because it's not true. But anyway.
Depends how long your ellipsis is in the middle of that sentence.
Think 5 years is a lot. You're very formed by 5. And I think that like the key today, I think, is first of all, just awareness of this concept, just thinking about this concept, reasoning from first principles versus reasoning by analogy, and just getting that in your head and realizing that that the world is, this is this Steve Jobs kind of quote. He said something like, the world, it's this epiphany you can have when you realize the world is that you see around you was built by people no smarter than you.
So before I reveal why I pulled out this clip, which is, I guess, in and of itself, yet another open loop. But before I reveal that, this episode was from February 2019, and we're recording this in September 2019. So Neil, just give me your general first impressions of hearing your former self as a host there.
Well, first of all, I should say that I love how you call them episodes, because of course they are. But on my podcast, 3 Books, I always call them chapters. chapter 22 with Tim Urban, just to try to use some of what you taught me to like brand it as with the theme. You're using the page turning sound. I'm using like I'm renaming episodes completely into chapters.
Love it. I love that.
Yeah, just a small thing. When I hear it, I'm delighted you picked that, because I did think that was just so funny that he said the phrase, "I was an only child till I was 5." Like, that was, you just never hear anyone describe themselves as an only child if they indeed have siblings, which he does. But I love that he was like really paying attention to that. And when I listen to that, the thing I remember, of course, is honestly, man, we were in Soho in Manhattan in a coffee shop in the middle of the day. It was a tight coffee shop full of people. There was a woman speaking like Spanish on her cell phone beside me the entire time, blaring like full in my ear. And the guy beside Tim Urban recognized him and knew him and was like kind of not eavesdropping, but like he was kind of like a Tim Urban fanboy, and like was like kind of like watching the podcast like in real time, like a fan, like an audience. And so it was like a really weird atmosphere. And when I listen to that, part of the benefit for me as the host of doing them live is I get to relive the actual physical experience, which was just beautiful to do that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons I did want to pull it, is it's in a coffee shop, which goes back to why I told the story of you with the apples is, you can't get embarrassed and be self-conscious when you're doing these things live and not choosing an office or a studio, because you got to waltz into a coffee shop and have the gumption to just plop down, set up your microphones, do an interview while people were watching and doing their thing. And maybe they're not watching, and so they're being a little ignorant that they should be quiet, and they don't care, right? It's their coffee shop, their day. And so, that takes some gumption. It takes this ability to just say, I'm going to roll with this. And I always admired that about you, Neil. But the second thing I wanted to bring up about this clip was such a delightful thing other interviewers can learn from, which is, when Tim says, "I was an only child until I was 5," and you said, "I like how you phrased that," and then you repeated the phrase, that's such a great hosting technique, because whether you did it as a technique or it just came naturally, either way, I think it's a skill that you learn. You essentially played the role there as a guide. You were like allowing your listeners not to miss something that you, the guide, wanted them to clearly see, which is that phrase is so interesting. It's something called signposting, which is when you make a show, you put up a verbal sign where it either says, okay, something is coming, don't miss this, pay attention to this detail, or you reflect back and be like, did you get that? That was super important. So you put up a sign that you plant in someone's mind as like it was interesting or important. So I love that you did that. You just kind of jumped in, planted a little signpost. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I did want to call that out.
I don't think it was conscious at all, but I did want to reflect back to you that it, like, I'm just trying to focus on him. So if he says something that I resonate with, then rather than think what would the listener want to focus on, I was sort of thinking like I want to focus. It's sort of selfish. Like I wanted to focus on that, so I just called it out for that reason. The other thing I wanted to just say about having the gumption to be in a live environment that could go any which way, like a coffee shop in New York, is I used to think at the beginning of 3 books that I should call the coffee shop. I should ask them for permission. I should see if like they could carve a corner out, maybe save me a seat. Like, and I think back in February of 2019, like I may have actually done that. I don't think if I did that. I can't recall if I did that or not. But nowadays, I've decided that it's better radio, or it's a better podcast experience, really, if I get kicked out. Like, I almost want there to be some tension or friction. Like, if a manager walks over in the middle of us recording and says to us, "Excuse me, you guys can't do that in here." Well, we will hear that on the recording, won't we? And then if he's like, "Go outside, like get out of here," so we'll hear that. So then I say, "Okay," and then we walk out to the side. I press record again or keep it recording, and then I'm on the street. I did that in the David Sedaris episode. The David Sedaris chapter, where we went. Like, I paused it. We went to the green room. I came back. I asked if we could have more time. You can hear the publicist say you can have a few more minutes. I go with him a bit further. And when I did the editing for that chapter, I then interjected and said, "Okay, this is where I asked David Sedaris if I could go with him into the green room." He said yes, so let's go there now. And like another way of signposting, I guess, is that I'm letting the setting dictate itself based on what happens, and then I can use signposting and editing to then guide the listener to what actually happened at the time later. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. The last thing to tease out there is like you said, you're so focused on Tim and also what lights you up authentically, and you're just focused on that. And that creates this like really nice, rich experience. It also builds rapport. Tim is somebody who, I interviewed him for my show. I'm somebody who I'm long-winded. Tim is certainly long-winded. He can meander. He has that brain. It's almost like if you tried to picture it, it's like a detective board full of string and different photos and nodes, right? Because he jumps around a lot, but it's all connected to him.
That's how his blog posts are.
Yeah, it's all connected to him. But to you, especially hearing him speak it instead of reading it, it can be tough to track sometimes. And as a host, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's tough because you want to jump in. And his answers are dense and they jump around. So I think it could be hard to get somebody like that just to be and chat and sort of slow down. But you jumped in and you created this really warm moment that helped further relax both him and the listener and makes him more mindful, helps you focus on something that lights you up so you're more mindful. And then, then he proceeded with the answer. So I just love that because I think we're too hesitant to jump in sometimes and say, hey, I actually authentically really like that. Let me talk about that a little bit with you. Or, it's not, I'm interrupting. Whoa, stop, Neil. I want to ask you this question. Or, hey, you're not answering my question. It's just what a person would do. You're like, oh, I really like that. And then they're like, yeah, really? Yeah, me too. And then you start to be friends a little bit.
Totally. And we have become deeper friends since that conversation, I think, because of the conversation. But the other person I wanted to mention here is Pete Holmes. He hosts a really popular podcast called You Made It Weird.
Yeah.
He's a really famous comedian and his podcast is incredible. And one thing you'll notice if you listen to that show is he interrupts and interjects incessantly. Okay, I never plan to use I 3 times in a row there, but he interrupts and interjects incessantly. And so,
hold on. Let me interrupt there, Neil. You use alliteration in every one of your titles for your chapters, by the way. So don't say you don't intend to be alliterative. Every one of your chapter titles, people listening should go check out 3 books. Every one of the episodes is so awesome just to read the title because you are so great at alliteration. It's amazing. So don't
always allow
it.
alliteration. I always allow alliteration.
Oh, come on.
So here's what I was going to say is, and you don't want to know how long it takes me to come up with these chapter titles. I spend way too much time on my iPhone playing with the words. But anyway, Pete Holmes. So what I was going to say is you also, if you want to, like, as you said, be human, just interrupt naturally, all that stuff. Just be okay with the haters. Like if you read the review and here's the proof in the pudding. Pete Holmes, like 3,000, 4,000, reviews on iTunes, like a very, very popular podcast, huge listenership, etc. If you read the reviews, 4 out of 5 reviews, 4 out of every 5 loves the show. 1 out of every 5, which is a very, very high percentage. 1 out of every 5, high, is like 1 star saying, cannot listen. The guy interrupts too much. So I'm saying he's got a very high percentage of people all hating on the one exact thing over and over again. Does it make him change? No. but I'm just saying, when you are yourself, you just got to be okay with the fact that you're not going to be everyone's taste. Rather than go for the lowest common denominator, just find your tribe.
I love that. Let's go to the next clip. So this next clip is from your episode with, and I was so excited when you said you were doing this because it's with the legendary Judy Blume. So she's won over 90 awards for her writing, which I learned from your show, 90 awards, unsurprisingly. She's sold actually almost as many millions of her books, 85 million. She's written things like Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is from 1970, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing from 72. In 73, she followed that up with Deanie. Blubber was 74.
It goes on and on.
Amazing, legendary author. So a lot we could talk about here, but first let's go to your clip with the one and only Judith Sussman, aka Judy Blume.
Well, I really appreciate you welcoming me down here, and I've brought with me a thank you. And this thank you is my old tattered copy of Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I was in a group chat last night with my mom, my dad, and my sister, telling them how excited I was to chat with you. And it spawned, I can show you this after the chat, I spawned a huge conversation in the text of my mom, my dad, and my sister telling all of their memories of me walking around the kitchen, reading this book, pretending to be Fudge, saying, Pita, Pita, no, all the lines. And my mom says, this is where you found your voice, Neil. And now today, I'm 38. I'm interviewing you with my voice on this, the only show in the world by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians, 3 books. And so I want to say thank you, because I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for this book when I was a child. So
I'm
thank you.
very glad that it was special for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was at 4:20, so it's pretty early in the episode. Tell me why you did that. Why did you create that moment?
Well, it was really interesting, Jay. So this is chapter 4, as you said. Like, it's one of the very first chapters I did of 3 books. And her body language, as I launched into that, dropped completely. She actually was not interested in hearing praise about herself. I think that she gets a lot of that all day, every day. And it was like, I saw her body language and her face default into like, I'm supposed to smile mode. And then even her answer, which you heard, was like, I'm so glad it was special for you. And then if you, I think, kept playing it, sometime in the next minute or two, she says, I thought we were here to talk about my books. It was actually a little bit sassy. She's 80. She can be definitely sassing me around, but she's like, oh, wait a minute. Are we here to talk about my books, not your ranting on your books? So I was like, actually, I did it. I don't know if it worked, but I did it because I wanted to, all my guests on my show aren't people on PR tour, doing the publicity circuit, pitching their zero. 100% of my guests are people, and I even say on my website, I do not accept pitches. My show does not accept you asking to be on it.
Bravo.
It's only people that I have reached out to, period. That's it. That's the only thing.
Awesome.
Right? So therefore, I have an opportunity in the beginning of the show, before we record or right we start recording, to tell them why. Tim, I've been reading your blog for years. I love Wait But Why. Thanks so much for coming on. Judy, I loved your book when I was a kid. That's why I reached out to you. Thanks for coming on. All I'm trying to do is just make sure they know that this is like, I'm not like a CNN interviewer getting paid to interview. I'm like actually a genuine fan of their work or them somehow. And I just want to make sure they know that, because what I'm trying to do is like constantly increase trust between us so that the conversation can be more vulnerable, deeper, more authentic. And part of the way I do that is to tell them authentically why I'm there. And that begins with me authentically having them on the show for an authentic reason. That's all.
I've talked to some hosts that they talk about guests that they're not on their level, and sort of like they feel intimidated and they've tried to find ways to get on their level. For example, I talked to somebody who interviewed an NBA player, and he's like, this guy is super famous. He's in the media all the time. I am not. I'm a podcast host. It's great. Actually, I think you know this guy. His name is Ryan Hawk.
Yeah. He's a great podcaster.
Great podcaster. He's got the Learning Leader show. And so he talked to me about how he tries to find ways to sort of just humanize it a little bit, where it's not you're this celebrity, I'm the interviewer. It's we're two people chatting. And so I really respected the fact that you did that, because it's what you authentically wanted to do. So you should.
I stole another idea from Ryan Hawk, by the way.
Oh, what's that?
After I went on the Learning Leader podcast or Learning Leader show, like a week later in the mail, I got like a thank you card handwritten by him, and I believe a t-shirt, like the Learning Leader t-shirt. And I was like, wow, that's the first podcast where I, as a guest, received a present for coming on. So now I mail all my guests presents after they come on my show. So like I mail Judy Bloom like my favorite chocolate chip cookies, for example.
Now I feel so bad that I don't do that.
Well, I'll be expecting some really fun. I'm just kidding.
Right.
But I just stole that idea from Ryan Hawk. And the purpose of it was not to do anything other than say, like, you know what? Like, they're giving me their time, their IP, their, all that stuff. I don't put ads on it. I could, but I don't. And it's like, it's a gracious thing for someone to give you an hour, you know what I mean? And record it. So I stole that idea from Ryan straight up.
Judy probably gets bombarded with interview requests. Certainly you said she gets bombarded with praise. So how did you get to interview her? Especially because this was so early in your run. I believe you actually recorded this before you launched the show. So you didn't even have that, I'm sure you had some great guests you could cite to her, but you couldn't share with her an episode, or maybe you did behind the scenes that says, look, this is how it sounds. It's different. It's awesome. It's a prestige vehicle. Also, we have all these downloads and people, like, you have no proof yet. So how did this actually come together?
Do you want to read my cold pitch email?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, here it is. And I have not read this since I sent it, so I have no idea how embarrassing this is going to be. So the first question you're probably wondering is, how did I get her email? And I think what I usually do is I go to their website and I guess it. So her website is judybloom.com. So I guess what the iteration might be before that. You know what I mean? Like her domain. So I said, "Hey, Judy, my mom says imitating fudge and Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing was my first artistic performance as a child. I would read it to my sister in the bathtub and I still have my torn and tattered copy. Today, I'm the New York Times bestselling author of 5 books, including The Book of Awesome, which has sold over 1 million copies. And my artistic performances, all inspired by fudge, include a couple TED Talks and over 50 speeches a year. The reason I'm writing you a note is because I host a new podcast called 3 Books, where in each episode, I hadn't called them chapters yet, I uncover and discuss the 3 most formative books of an inspiring individual. It's the only podcast in the world by and for book writers, makers, sellers, lovers, and librarians. Would you be willing to be a guest? I am happy to come to you and do it entirely around your schedule. It would honestly be a huge dream to meet you and talk about which books shaped you. Sample guests include Seth Godin, Gretchen Rubin, Tim Urban, ... and hopefully you, ! Thanks for considering it, Neil. P.S. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret was the most formative book of my last guest, ... who owns 5 copies, including a framed and signed original dust jacket, ! I heard back from her team, not her specifically, but her assistant within 6 days, saying, "Hi, Neil. Thanks so much for your warm email to Judy. I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but I must send Judy's regrets. She's the driving force behind this, and she can't do it." Okay. So I got a rejection, actually, Jay, to answer you. And then she's opening her new bookstore in Key West, Florida, and she works there 24/7. Due to her new career, she hasn't been making any future commitments. The bookshop takes every minute in the day. Thanks again for thinking of Judy. Okay. Then I reply. So this is, I think, where most people would stop, right? You just asked and then you got rejected. You're done. You're out. Like, they just said no. They didn't just give you a no reply, which, by the way, is the most common no. The most common no I get is no reply, right? Gretchen Rubin has a famous phrase that's yes comes right away, no never comes. You know, I love that phrase. It's so true. But in this case, I actually got a response, and it's no. So then I write back, "Hey, I completely and totally understand. And I have a crazy idea that may help her bookstore in Key West as well. On April 3rd, I am doing 2 interviews with Dave Barry, another inspiration as a grown up, and then your fellow book owner, the amazing Mitchell Kaplan." So like Mitchell Kaplan, I did the research and know he owns the bookstore chain that she owns a bookstore in. So it's like I'm interviewing him at Coral Gables, which is outside of Miami, on this date. On April 4th, I'm giving a speech in the morning to Volvo, and I put in brackets, they're paying for my trip. I'm trying to tell her that, like, I'm not going out of my way here. So, like, I'm getting paid for travel, and I don't fly home to Toronto until late that night. I looked at flights, and I can actually get to Key West around 1 p.m., and I do not need to leave Key West until 7 p.m. So are you ready for my crazy idea? May I interview Judy in the Books and Bookstore, her store, on April 4th, anytime between 2 and 5 p.m.? As you know, it would be a huge dream for me. If my excitement has caused me to overstep or impose, I will humbly apologize and take a step back. It would not be the first time. I get excited a lot. Please know this all comes from a very earnest and honest place. Thank you so much for considering it. And by the way, Judy's assistant responded 4 days later, 4 days where I heard nothing and figured it was over. And she said, "Hi, Neil. Sometimes the crazy ideas will work out. Judy can do your interview with you next Wednesday, April 4th, pending your flying arrangements, but she must leave the store by 3:30 p.m. due to previous commitments. Please confirm." Boom, boom. So heck yeah, I booked a flight from Miami to Key West and back within hours of each other, flew down there, went from there to the store. I knew I had 20 minutes with her. I think she let me go half an hour and took off. And then it's always easier to get more guests when you have a guest to tell that you had on.
All right, let's go to the third and final clip. Quick story. The first time we met in the real world, I was speaking in Toronto, and we'd had that interaction on my show, and I reached out and said, "Hey, I'll be in town." And in our time spent together, which I remember fondly, I learned something about you that I think maybe is serving you well on your show. We went to brunch at this awesome place in Toronto where you live, and
Bar Raval.
Yep. And we walked around the city and talked for a while and talked about our craft of speaking and talked about writing and your career and mine, etc. You were very helpful giving advice. And then we saw a grocery store.
I have no memory of this.
Interesting. These are both open loops, by the way. And how mundane can a great open loop be? Then we saw a grocery store.
That's a good one.
Right? Now listeners are like, what the hell? Who cares? Why is this interesting? Tell me more. So anyways, we saw a grocery store. You went in, you're like, I'm going to buy some apples. Jay, you ever have this type of apple? I had no idea what you're talking about. You walk in, you buy this bag of apples, and we walk out and we're just chatting, and like you there's some people on the street and you're like offering one here and there apples. You're just like, hey, you want an apple? And I was like, wow, like this is a guy who doesn't seem to get embarrassed when he interacts with other people. Like you just put yourself out there, it seems, and happily and in a friendly fashion, in a way that doesn't put people off. You just put yourself out there. You don't seem very embarrassed. And I feel like that's so useful when you create the kind of show that you have, which is you're doing it in person. So you don't know what they're going to be like face to face. You don't know what environment you're going to find yourself in. You just kind of have to go with it and stay true to your friendly self. And I remember the last moment where we parted ways in Toronto, you called, I think, your book publisher, maybe? And you're like, hey, I'm outside your office. I just bought some apples. You want some? Let me come up and chat.
It totally sounds like me. I can totally believe I would do it because I do that kind of stuff a lot, but I have no memory of doing that with you. But you're right. I do that all the time. When I buy chocolate, my goal is always to get rid of the whole bar because otherwise I'll eat it all. So I'm like, want a chocolate? Want a piece of chocolate? I always ask people if they want stuff.
So for the final clip, I was looking for an episode where you had to remix the format, where you either had to or you tried to, just to change things up, keep it refreshing for you and for your listener. And one really easy way to do that is I just looked at the title of the episodes as a starting point, because usually you start with the name of the person and then you say something alliterative, which is awesome. And we talked about that briefly. And then I found this one episode that just said a #1 ranked bartender on fiddling with frankincense and fighting for freedom. And then I realized this is the bartender behind the place that you and I first met, Bar Raval, which, I didn't realize until this episode, but I didn't know it was run by somebody so prestigious and known and successful, the #1 rated bar in Canada in 2018.
I wouldn't take you anywhere worse, Jay.
Red carpet treatment. I love it. Describe the interior of that place, because you are so good at describing things on your show. And it's also just stunning with all that wood. It's really different. So can you just describe it to people that have never been?
Well, although I'm not a big name restaurateur or chef, as I understand, when you become one, you get a lot of rich people coming over and saying, I can give you a bunch of money and I'll open you a nice restaurant. And so people do that. And so they put they sunk either $500,000 or $1 million, I think that's gotten inflated with the word on the street, into this interior of this bar. So they paid a lot of money. It had to be mahogany. It was only mahogany wood. And they got a special machine to carve it, I think around to look like Gaudi, so Gaudi, the sort of famous Spanish architect, Gaudi-esque curved wood, heavily etched interior that feels like you're in something like the Ewok Village crossed with, one of those like old IMAX movies where you like fly into someone's body and like zoom into all their blood cells and their muscles. So you're like in like an Ewok Village built out of wooden muscles.
Right. It's like sweeping arches with like a kind of pillar once in a while. Like that's the muscly feel to it. It's like sinewy.
No chairs in the whole thing. You have to stand up. It's tapas. It's meant to be interactive.
Right. So the owner and the bartender, his name is Robin Goodfellow, and he partly owns a bunch of places in Toronto. He's been a bartender for 16 years, and perhaps somewhat atypically for the show, I actually want to play not your interaction with him, but the story that you open the episode with about him, because it kind of contradicts a lot of the rapport building stuff that we're usually going to try in the working world or on a show. So it kind of runs counter to the convention, which is why I want to bring it up. So just to tee up the story, you and a friend had walked into the bar and it was your first time there. And the bartender, turns out it was him, said, "What do you want?" And you said, "I don't know. What do you have? Do you have a drink menu?" And he said, "No. What do you want?" And you said, "Well, what do you have?"
He's like, "No, what do you want?" And I'm like, kind of a bit stunned. I'm with my friend, and I'm like, I'm trying to order a drink, and he's just like not letting me. And so I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want something sweet. I don't want something sweet. And he kind of does this like slow 360-degree kind of swivel where he slowly turns behind him, stares at this gigantic wall full of glass bottles, tinctures, potions, all these colorful liquids, then swivels back to me, stares me right in the eye, and with like this sort of tongue-in-cheek, but like this ferocious intensity, he's like, "Does it look like a fucking sweet place to you?" And I'm taken aback. I mean, this guy's swearing at me. I mean, I'm just not trying to get a drink. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know how to, what are you telling me, sir? I'm like, tell me what, I just want a drink. How do I get a drink? He's like, you tell me what you want. And I was like, well, I don't know what you have. He's like, tell me what you want. There's no such thing as a sweet drink. Every single drink in this whole menu is balanced. It's this way, is that way. You know, it's not just like, you can't just say not sweet. You have to tell me what you want, what you feel like, what you want to, what kind of night you want to have.
How did that story end? Because clearly you're not necessarily loving that experience. And then you tell him, all right, I'm thinking about these traits. So how did this story end up?
Yeah, he like swore at me. He was like, you know, I finally like, you know, gave in to this idea that this guy like wanted like to force me to like order by, I guess, adjective. Like he wanted me to order by mood. Like I don't know how to use your menu, sir. Like I don't know how to order here. And he's like, tell me what you want. So I was like, okay, man. I just like threw it down. I was like, okay. I want something that makes me feel optimistic. I want to be refreshed. I want to have energy. I want to have a little pep. And I like went on this like little rant about how I want to feel. And he said, that's what no one fucking does and what everyone should do. And he like swore at me. And I was like, whoa. But he then proceeded to create a drink that, I'm not joking, and people don't believe me when I say this, actually literally tasted like every adjective I just articulated.
Again, the reason I wanted to play this was, it sounds so off-putting. Like we talked about, make them feel welcome and warm and human. And we have all these like uplifting things we've talked about today. And this guy did the opposite of all that. And you loved him so much that you invited me to that place immediately when I said I was going to be there. You go there a lot, I'm assuming. You invited him onto your show. So now you're publicly associated with the guy. So clearly there's not just one way to build rapport. Like, what is it about that challenger style that you kind of respect it?
Well, first of all, him and I have talked about this a number of times since. He insists that he wasn't as strong as I make him out to be, but when I tell it to other people, they're like, yeah, that could be him. And he says to me a couple things. One, I would not have challenged you if it didn't seem to me that you wanted to be challenged. Part of what they're doing at Bar Val and why this bar is so successful is that they are curating an experience for you. If you come in with a bunch of people and you want to have a loud night with no interruption, the waiter will be, or the server will be extremely like demure and like, you know, you really won't see them. If you're like coming solo and sit at the bar and you like see them all antsy and you're trying to work something through, they'll chat you up and like get it out of you. Like they curate an experience. And so he was curating for me an experience I wanted, which was he could sense in me that I wanted to go. I wanted to be challenged. And I like being mentally punched in the face. Like I say that a lot, but I like when someone says to me, Neil, you're thinking about this all the wrong way. Here's exactly how you should be thinking about it. And they lay it out there in a thoughtful and intelligent way. I love that, Jay, because unfortunately, and you know this, one thing that happens is you have even like a modicum, if I'm saying that word correctly, and I don't know if I'm right, I am, even a tiny amount of success is suddenly you are living in an echo chamber where such a vastly, like I went through elementary school where 50% of the feedback I got was positive, 50% was negative. I lived at home where 50% positive, 50% negative. And suddenly after my blog got popular, my book got popular, I'm like living in a world where 99.9% of the feedback is positive. And so if I don't source out and create and try to find challenging people to challenge me strongly, then I won't get that and I won't grow and improve like from feedback. So whenever someone really steps to me and like really like, as I call it, intellectually punches me in the face, like really, really says you're doing this all wrong, I love that.
You had this initial stab. This is your first podcast and it's come along so nicely and you have such joy when you do it, I can tell. I certainly love listening to it. I hope it continues to help you with your creative endeavors, your fulfillment, moving books and speeches, whatever goals you have for it. But I'm along the idea of improvement. What's one thing that you wish you could go back in time and tell yourself when you started? And what's one thing that looking forward, you want to try to get better at?
Well, you know, you and I both have talked a lot that it's important to pitch or attach yourself to one word. So like my website's called 1000 Awesome Things. My first book's called The Book of Awesome. My new book is called You Are Awesome, right? It's all about resilience. But here I have a podcast that has no mention of that word. And so I just think it's harder for people to know that it's me or associate it with me. And that's fine. But I think it would have been easier to gain footing and to gain fans if people were like, when they're scrolling through whatever it is, Stitcher or whatever they're looking through, to be like, oh, it's that guy. So the world is just too busy and too loud and too frenetic to not be anything but, you know, your simple and most two-dimensional and branded self, unfortunately. And the opposite of that is that flattens you as a person and it not dehumanizes you, but it makes you overly simple. So I wanted to be something different. At the same time, I wrestle with that because I just know if I'd called it like Awesome Podcast or the Awesome Books, like I would have had and I had the logo and I know I could have launched it way easier. I put myself through a lot of hard work and maybe it would be way bigger if I had just used like the brand that I'm already known for.
if you look at your performance as a host, what's something that if you just made one simple thing, you'd be a little bit happier with your performance over the next 20 plus episodes?
Almost everything, Jay, comes down for me to preparation. So instead of putting 40 hours in to prepare for a conversation, I wish I put 50 or I wish I put 60, because I'll stumble upon something and I'll be like, I wonder if they're thinking this or if they already know this, and I won't know the answer. And so I just read Howard Stern's book, Howard Stern Comes Again, which I highly recommend. It's essentially just a summary of his 24 best interview transcripts in the last 40 years. That's all the book is. And it's fascinating to read because you also hear how he prepares for it. And he puts like 40 hours of work in and keeps things on his bedside table. And I do the same thing. So before every podcast I do, I spend essentially an entire day wandering around untethered, thinking about the person. Having read all their stuff, their 3 books, I think about what I could ask them or where the conversation could go. I try to vision where I could take it. So I'm putting a lot of time in, but if I could do more, that'd be a lot better. If I had a research team, if I had a research assistant, if I had if I had a Howard Stern like industrial complex where like people could be feeding me, like I'm putting myself through the meat grinder of preparation for myself, but I wish I was way better prepared before the interviews.
Neil, I think you're driven, you're generous, you're creative, you think differently about this stuff, and it's a pleasure to not only understand your show better, but to also know that you're out there in this small but growing community of people running these shows. That it's good to know that you're trying to pave new paths. So thanks for doing this.
You created this. This show wouldn't be what it is without you. You have consulted on it with me. I've run it by you for like the years leading up to it, and you are the master when it comes to creating beautiful art. So thank you for all your wisdom and for helping me create this podcast.
I so appreciate it. I'm happy that my $20 bribe for you to say it at the very end worked. So thanks for staying.
That's Neil Pasricha, author of The Book of Awesome, The Happiness Equation, and You Are Awesome. This episode was produced by Jay Akanzo himself. Our theme music is by Cardboard Rocket Ship. 3 Clips is a Castos original production. Castos provides tools for podcasters to grow your audience and connect with your community. Learn more at castos.com. And if you're thirsting for some fresh Jay content, you can find him on Twitter, new baby notwithstanding, at Jay Akanzo, or go to jayakanzo.com and sign up for the newsletter. Thanks for sticking with 3 Clips.